Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords, and today I'm going to talk to you about high-level campaigns, especially in the OSR. And the reason that I came up with this topic is because recently on some social media there was this thing, I guess it was a hashtag more than anything, but it was a term that was invented as a sort of way to complain about the certain things that some people take as stereotypes, I guess, of the OSR and OSR style of play. And this hashtag, it's called mudcore. And so the suggestion was that, OSR fans, what they like, first of all, I believe it was originally started as a critical perspective of the OSR, as in made by people that don't like the OSRs. And so they call it mudcore, and they said, well, OSR people, all they ever do is play level 1, 2, or 3 characters, and then, they go into the dungeon and it's all filthy, and then they get killed, and then they start it all over again, and it's pointless, right? I think that was the deal. Now, some OSR people took the term and embraced it, and started to talk about how awesome low-level play in OSR is, and how that kind of gritty survival type adventuring is actually really cool, and, complaining that, 5e characters at low levels are already way too tough, and so there's much less of that excitement of potential death being right around the corner in any OSR game, and I guess that's pretty much true in some sense, because in an OSR game, it's entirely possible to have a first level character, even let's say a first level fighter, that it just has 1 hit point, and so that is certainly high risk play. Whereas I think in 5th edition, it's practically, you'd never find even a wizard with only 1 hit point, pretty much. Anyhow, the thing is, though, and here's where my opinion comes in, is that this is still, one side is saying, oh, the OSR sucks because it only does low-level play. The other side is saying low-level play is awesome in the OSR. But my point is that the OSR doesn't just do low-level play. High-level play in the OSR is actually fantastically awesome, and people should really look into that and understand, how to run it, because I think also one of the reasons that some people have come to love the mudcore type of game, right, like the character funnels, where you just have a meat grinder of characters in a dungeon type setting. There's a simplicity to that, and also it's very easy to run. It's extremely playable, right? A beginner DM can do it. Beginner players can do it. There's very little that can go wrong as such in that, because you're playing a game where you're presuming almost everyone's going to die. But high level play is a bit more complex, and sometimes people just make it too complex, and so people have trouble managing it, and it's for various reasons. And so I'm going to talk a bit about all of those. For starters, high-level play in OSR games can be extremely exciting, and contrary to what you may have heard, can take any number of different forms. And today I've got here 3 of my products: Lion and Dragon, Star Adventure, and World of the Last Sun, all 3 of which have had high-level play at my own table. So the original Lion and Dragon campaign, set in Dark Albion, started with characters at level 1. By the end of the campaign, about 5 and a bit years later, the characters there were all level 14 or 15. And that, in the Dark Albion setting, is very high level, right? It was established that the best people in the world in that setting are about level 15 to 18 or so, So it's like very high level play. And Star Adventure, my Star Adventure campaign, which is set in the Star Wars universe, but of course Star Adventure itself is not a Star Wars game, but it can be used to run Star Wars. We'll put it that way. In my Star Adventure campaign, where my characters are a group of kind of criminal scum that end up sort of participating in the very early beginnings of the rebellion, the characters started out as level 1. In almost all my games, you start out as level 1, so I'm not against low-level play, right? And now they're all like level 15 or something like that again. And so this makes them like incredibly powerful people, like powerful enough that they have the chance to take on, one of there's a character there, it's a Force user, and he had a chance to take on an Imperial Inquisitor and a Jedi Hunter, basically. And they were pretty evenly matched, So there's high level play there. And in World of the Last Sun, of course, that's based on my DCC campaign, because World of the Last Sun is not an RPG unlike the other two. It's a setting. In World of the Last Sun, that campaign has been running now for 10 years, over 10 years. And it's got characters all over the board, because the way we play it in that very Gonzo style is, okay, so you die, you start a new 0-level character, or 3 new 0-level characters, as the case may be, and you start all over again. So we've got some characters in that campaign, like right now, who are level 0, some who are level 1, some who are level 7, I guess, and some who are level 8, and Bill the Elf is level 10. So it's wide angle RP there, where you don't have a party that are necessarily equal levels even. It makes for some very interesting gaming. Of course, being Gonzo, it's weirder than a typical campaign. And the point is, in all 3 of these campaigns, you have very different things that ended up going on. Because a lot of people think, okay, well, what's high-level OSR gaming? And so they think, well, that means at 9th level you get a keep, and then you get some men, and then you start, using Dominion rules or whatever, and you have to manage that keep. That's the 1E model, basically. But there's other people like, no, when you're like high level, you have to end up going on these epic quests, right? It's kind of the 2nd edition model. And both of those are acceptable. They have different challenges to them. But neither of them are the one way that it has to be done. Right? There's a lot of ways to handle high-level play, but there are certain things to keep in mind. Now, the first thing that you have as an issue with high-level play in a lot of OSR games is that the characters are going to be vastly more powerful than the typical citizens of the world, so to say. Right? And so you have to kind of be capable of explaining that and incorporate that understanding that, you as a DM, the one thing that you don't really want to do is just have, and this is why a high-level dungeon can be very cool, but it needs to be very different in its style from a low-level dungeon. And it's probably not something at low level you might be going to dungeons all the time. At high level, it's got to be a dungeon for a very special reason, right? And it has to be able to maintain the challenge. So in a lot of games, the understanding is that these people have become, epic or legendary heroes. And then that needs to be kind of incorporated into the concept. There's another problem in a lot of OSR type games, and of course in D&D itself, which is one of the biggest dissuaders of high level play. And this is that at a certain point in high level play, you are basically, you have much easier access, let's say, to resurrection. And so suddenly your character's death is never going to be absolute, unless there's a total party kill. There are some exceptions, of course. For example, in AD&D First Edition, there's a resurrection survival rule. So every time you die, there's a chance that they can't bring you back. It's normally not a very big chance, but there's a chance that you're dead forever. And that's still good enough, right? Because that's the whole thing. I think one of the biggest features that classic Dungeons and Dragons, and certainly current year Dungeons and Dragons also has, is that there's no skin in the game for high-level characters anymore, because they have insta healing, insta resurrection. So, I ran a rule cyclopedia campaign that went all the way to level 36, so RCD&D, all the way to level 36. And what we realized is that by the time that the characters were in their mid-20th levels, mid-20s levels, the game had become very unusual. It had kind of gone past boundaries of functionality. And that's because when you were using those rules in their full set, so you had fighters capable of doing these incredible fighting maneuvers. You had wizards able to do, 20d6 fireballs. Combats were often reduced to whoever wins initiative kills the other character, right? Because assuming you're using an opponent, a monster that is worthy of that sort of fight, the fight comes down to initiative, because whoever hits the other one first, and if they don't, if they fail a save or whatever, the one that successfully hits first kills the other one, and then that's it, right? And so, and then, everybody else goes and pays whatever, I think it was 10,000 gold or something, and they resurrect the guy again. So he just keeps coming back. Again, unless you have a total party kill. And that means that in itself, this isn't actually something that makes it impossible to do high-level play. However, in a world like that, you then have to take that into account, right? The world of Mystara, for example, the world of Rule Cyclopedia D&D, actually does take that into account, right? So it has the kingdom of Alphatia, which is the kingdom of these wizards, and they're all high-level. Like, they have a parliament that is like 1,036-level wizards, right? Top level. You can't get higher than that in Rule Cyclopedia. And so and part of the storyline in that setting of Mystara in Alphatia, but there are similar problems in some of the other countries, is that, well, because you have like 36 level characters who essentially will never really die, like between potions of longevity and resurrection and all this other stuff, wishes, whatever. And because for them at their level, it's easy to get them all. It creates enormous dynastic issues, right? And tremendous social problems. And so that would be something you'd have to incorporate, on the other hand, the other solution is run a game, an OSR game, where your characters can be high level, meaning super tough, but not immortal. And in all of my games, that's the case. For example, Lion and Dragon, Star Adventurer, Invisible College also, and all of the rules that I've made, there is no easy access resurrection spell. In fact, in most of my games, it's almost impossible to get resurrection of any kind. And if you do, it's usually at some terrible price. So what that does is that you have high-level characters that if they die forever. Now, in Lion and Dragon, for example, to even add to that more so, you have the fact that high-level characters are incredibly capable, right? Like the fighters that are high-level will have multiple attacks per round. They'll be incredible at blocking. They're incredibly tough. Wizards that are high level will have all kinds of magical protections around them, probably. Will have like demons that they can summon at their whim and whatnot. High level clerics can sometimes literally just call for God to strike you down. But they're very much still mortal men, because there's a critical hit rule in Lion and Dragon. So what I specifically needed that rule to reflect was the number of times in real history during the War of the Roses where you had these incredible badasses that ended up having an unlucky turn, and then some Kentish spearman in the middle of a battle just takes them down with one lucky hit, right? Or sometimes a mob of Kentish spearmen. Apparently the Kentish people really like to kill high-level famous aristocrats for some reason, but they really did. But it happened more than once. So they're also always like the first to open up into revolt and stuff, But anyway, that had to be reflected. It's the kind of the Game of Thrones sort of deal, right? Where you have like this character that's super badass. Everybody, you see he's badass and he does all this great stuff. But then, he dies at some moment where you really weren't expecting him to die. You're like, oh my God, right? And that has a huge value for high-level play, because it means suddenly that at high-level play, your characters are still in potential danger. They're much less danger. The danger is much, much smaller than when they're level 0 or level 1, obviously. But an unlucky situation can still kill them off, and that changes the whole dynamic. But you also have to think about, like, what kind of adventuring are you doing? The point of high-level adventure is that it opens it up so that the adventuring, if you're doing it right as a DM, your characters by that time, your players by that time, their characters will have a sense of priority for themselves over the campaign. And then they'll decide what they're doing. And all you have to do is make sure that that is clear and provided to them, right? So, for example, in the Star Adventure campaign I'm running, you have this group of characters who were originally a bunch of, rogues and criminals and stuff that were on the run from the Empire. And when they get high level, eventually they've like made enough credits that they don't even care about money anymore. And they've, taken their personal revenges of against people that their individual characters had been, had problems with. And they've even, taken revenge at different times against the Empire and everything. And they're like, well, what do we do now? Like, they're really high level now. And, they've done like heists and, special jobs and all kinds of things, and done some like cosmic adventuring and stuff. And they're like, well, we might as well help these rebels that we keep running into. So they start like working with the rebels, mainly out of like a sense of we've gotten as far as we can get right now, right? And so like for some of the characters or the NPCs, their ambition is actually to overthrow the Empire so that they can then form their own little criminal fiefdoms or whatever, right? And for others, it's actually more sincere, like they've realized that this is the cause they have to fight for. They've recognized the injustice inherent in the system, etc. But the point is, they have engineered this, right? I had no idea which direction this campaign would go. I didn't intentionally set it up so that they could become rebels, but that they didn't have to be. And for a long time, they weren't. But then they decided to be when they said, well, we're getting to a point where we either, we've got to do this, or we've got to go hide out in the unknown regions forever, or we've got to, find a way to get the Empire to pardon us all and make us Imperials. Because if not, what are we going to do? We can try to retire somewhere in hiding, but we're not going to live like, some kind of hermit on Tatooine or something. In the Lion and Dragon campaign, the characters were part of the War of the Roses, and they were agents of important and powerful men, right? In the early part of that campaign, they were working for the Earl of Warwick, and then later they ended up working for Richard III before he became king. So they were at some degree participating in missions, engaging in wars. But obviously, as they got higher level, they began to also have important responsibilities that were related to their class and to their social class and to all sorts of things like that, right? So you had like one character that at high level of play, he was a cleric, so he ends up becoming a clerical captain and has his own priory. Another character ends up raising himself up to be like landed gentry, basically from a relatively low beginning, and he ends up having even his own, like he has his own little village, basically, his own manor and everything, and he's doing kind of the maintenance stuff of that. And then you had like another character. You had you're having a couple of noble characters that end up obviously getting more and more involved in the politics of the War of the Roses. And then you had another guy that was like, he was a commoner soldier, and he was seeing all of these other people getting passed ahead of him, and he kind of, he might have been from Kent, I don't know. He started to have these rebellious thoughts, and he ends up going to the Sherwood, and he like rallies up these, some of these merry men that were there, and forms a special revolt with this, flag of 3 colors that he had. And it became like a major part of the high-level campaign. The rest of the player characters were, it was part of their mandate to take out this revolt that was going on in Sherwood. And they didn't know that it was their friend who was leading it. And it was a spectacular part of it's one of the most memorable sections of the campaign, and World of the Last Sun is more the classic thing. It's the epic quest thing from, the 2E example I was giving or whatever. The high level characters are, first of all, they're all lunatics, right? It's a Gonzo game, so they do whatever they want. But as a whole, they tend to end up picking up quests of importance to save the World of the Last Sun. Because the World of the Last Sun is a really screwed up world. It's a world that's like that has had a systems failure, let's say. It needs to be rescued on a very regular basis. And now, by the time they get to these higher levels, powerful patrons of different kinds, literal ones in the DCC sense, but also other kinds, people of importance, organizations, have been calling on them for help to do these things. So they have these big quests, and they tend to get lost in these side quests. And of course, they also have, most of them, a kind of a bad reputation, right? So obviously Bill the Elf being the most famous case. So there are a lot of people who want Bill the Elf dead. There's also a lot of people who want the Catboy dead. And those become major plots too. They have changed the landscape of parts of the World of the Last Sun. Right? Like there are sections that are in this book, which was written a few years ago, that are now completely different than what they look like in the book, right? They've changed, and sometimes changed multiple times over the course of that campaign. So these are guys that can, literally alter the space and the environment around them by their actions in some pretty big ways. And then also there's like personal aspects of their stories. You've had guys, Catboy's gotten married to the Minotaur woman. You don't want to know how the babies turn out. And Bill the Elf had even, he's got like weird time travel things that have happened related to his mysterious past. Heidi had a daughter with this badass female barbarian. And all of these things, Sammy has now discovered she has a half brother who is actually a half elemental son of the Queen of the Fire Realm. So all of those are like, there's a bit of soap opera-ishness, and then there's, this kind of crazy style epic questing. All of those are ways that you can run a high-level game. And so the key in the high-level game is, first of all, be wary of the potential pitfalls. You can't run it just like as if it was a low-level game. It's not about, you're fighting the monster and that's it, right? By the time you get to high-level play, all but the most epic monsters or opponents are meant to be more than anything incidental to the process of the adventure. They can't be the adventure itself. The adventure has to be about like the player characters enacting their agendas. And so that requires that you figure out how they can do that. But if you do it right, it's awesome. And now here's the way that it tends to happen wrongly, besides people with the lack of experience doing, like what I just said, treating it as if it's the same. It's just like a first level dungeon, except you fill it with bigger level monsters. That's not quite how it works. But the other big problem is that to really get to high level play, you actually have to play it to there. If you just started a campaign with characters who are, D&D type characters who are 10th level, let's say, that is not the same as if you start an adventure at level 0 or 1 and work your way to level 10. Because it changes the nature of how that campaign works. In the course of those 10 levels, the character goes through all these things, they go to these places, they see these things, they meet these people, and all of those become vital things that then in high-level play, the player character taps into, right? The people he meets are the people that become his contacts, his patrons, his clients, if that's the type of high-level play you're doing. Right, the places he goes to sets up the next great quests, if that's the type of high-level play you're doing. Right, the things he's killed grants him the fame and the glory that might get him a keep on the borderlands, if that's the kind of high-level campaign you're doing. And just starting at high level by itself is not going to have that same feeling because it won't have that depth. Part of what makes the high level play so awesome is that you had to have been playing for a long time in this campaign. And so the campaign has a much richer world of depth to it than it will in the early parts of the campaign. So you can't just skip all those. You have to play it through. And that's the really tough part. Anyways, that's about everything I wanted to say about this. If you found this video interesting, please share it. You can like the video, subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. And be sure to check out all my products, Lion and Dragon, Star Adventure, World of the Last Sun. The Gonzo Fantasy Companion is now out. It's in some ways a mechanics supplement for World of the Last Sun, but you can use it in any kind of Gonzo fantasy gaming. It's got all kinds of cool generators and rules. And as soon as I get it, I'll be showing it off to people here. Invisible College, RPG Pundit Presents PDF series still available there. You can get up to 108 different PDFs. You're bound to find one that you'll find interesting. So if you want to support me, you like the cut of my jib, or you're looking for some great material, look up in the description to this video. There are links to all of my products. Look them up and see if you don't find something you're going to like, because I'm pretty sure you will. And I guess that's everything. Please share the video. Currently smoking Near Up Poker plus Argento Natural.